Hi everyone, in this video I will be deconstructing the 2011 rhetorical analysis prompt and also the passage, which is written in 12 short paragraphs, which makes this a really good prompt, I think, to deconstruct. This is the Florence Kelley speech to women suffragists about child labor. This, again, in 2011. So here is our prompt. Florence Kelley was a United States social worker and reformer who fought successfully for child labor laws and improved conditions for working women. She delivered the following speech before the convention of the National American Woman Suffrage Association in Philadelphia on July 22, 1905. Read the speech carefully, then write an essay in which you analyze the rhetorical strategies Kelley uses to convey her message about child labor to her audience. Support your analysis with specific references to the text. And of course, a prompt in 2024 is not going to ask you to analyze rhetorical strategies. Instead, they're going to ask you to analyze just strategies. They're not going to use that word rhetorical. A couple of things really stand out to me in this prompt. So first of all, we get the information that she's a social worker and a reformer who fought successfully for child labor laws and improved conditions for working women. But then we also get the idea that her audience is a group of women attending a meeting of the National American Woman Suffrage Association in Philadelphia. And some students are probably not going to understand that suffrage was about voting rights for women. Although I think most AP English language students would, because they will have already gone through U.S. history. Even if it's not AP U.S. history, the word should be familiar to them. So I would hope that they would be able to pick that up. And then there are also hints in the passage that suffrage has to do with voting. And then the other thing in this prompt that I think is important is that we get the year that it was given, which is 1905, which means women do not yet have the right to vote. And again, that would be necessary for the student to already know that. It's not given anywhere. I don't think, however, that a student absolutely must link this speech to voting rights. I think that a student could just analyze Kelley's comments about child labor laws and improved conditions for working women and never talk about voting and do very well. But a guaranteed way to pick up that sophistication point would be linking a speech about child labor laws to women's voting rights, as the passage makes that clear. So we have our rhetorical triangle. The speaker, of course, is Florence Kelley. The audience is a group of women who are all suffragists, and the message is, we don't get the message from the prompt, but I think it's pretty easy to figure out what the message is, and the message is very clear within the passage that we are working children in industry at too early of an age and at too many hours, and that is brought up again and again and again. So here is paragraph 1. And I'm just going to point out some rhetorical moves that I think Kelley makes in this paragraph. First of all, we have parallelism in the paragraph. They vary in age from 6 and 7 years in the cotton mills of Georgia, and 8 and 9 and 10 years in the coal breakers of Pennsylvania, to 14, 15, and 16 years in more enlightened states. So we've got this parallelism here that contrasts a southern state, Georgia, with a northern state, Pennsylvania, and then hints at these more enlightened states, which she's of course using sarcasm there. They're only enlightened in comparison to Georgia and Pennsylvania. She brings up the cotton mills of Georgia, and I can't help. I mean, it's 1905. It's been 40 years since the end of slavery, and bringing up cotton mills, I think, connects child labor to slavery. I think that was a deliberate choice on her part. And then finally, earning their bread, I think, is a great phrase to be analyzed. It's linking the work of these children to the basic need of eating. It's linking the working of these children, I think, also to the French Revolution. And it's showing that this issue is somehow warlike in a way, that this is just as bad as going to war over industrial issues and over agricultural issues. So we have quite a few things going on in a very short paragraph. And I think it's also important to point out, I kind of hinted at this, but I want to explicitly say that she's right from the beginning pointing out that this is not a regional issue, that this issue is a United States issue. We get to paragraph 2, another short paragraph, and we can see that she is using present tense. So I think, that is an important rhetorical move to pick up on. It's going on right now. This problem is immediate, and the people in the crowd need to understand that this needs to be taken care of right away. Again, we have the word breadwinner in this paragraph, so it's a callback to the first paragraph. And then just the horror of the first sentence. No other portion of the wage earning class increased so rapidly from decade to decade as the young girls from 14 to 20 years. I mean, that is a horrific idea. That's a horrific situation. I think that her use of the word girls is important, and she will continue to use that word girls. She wants to infantilize the girls. She wants to make sure that everybody understands that these are children that should not be working. They should be going to school, and that should be their primary priority at this time. It shouldn't be going to school and then working a 12-hour midnight shift. The other thing that I want to point out about this paragraph is her lack of conjunctions. And she also had a lack of conjunctions, and I'm talking about coordinate conjunctions, in the first paragraph. So look at that last sentence here. They are in commerce, in offices, in manufacturing. So we don't have any conjunctions. It creates parallelism, and I think it creates just a punchy tone. It creates an aggressive tone. I can see her. I don't think that there's video of this speech. There is audio of this speech, but I can see her maybe pounding her hand on the podium as she says commerce, offices, manufacturing, getting a little louder because of the lack of conjunctions there. We get to paragraph 3, and we see again she starts to use repetition with while we sleep. That is going to come up again and again. But there's that word little girls again. So a callback, repetition of little girls. I think that's interesting diction to use the word little instead of young. I think that size did have a lot to do with why children were working in certain industries, because they were small enough to get inside the machines. Of course, obviously that was extremely dangerous, and they shouldn't have been asked to do things like that. And again, we have that lack of conjunction. In the deafening noise of the spindles and the looms spinning and wearing cotton wool, silks and ribbons for us to buy. So with no conjunction between wool and silks. And then finally, the use of the word us. She brings the problem into the room. She brings the problem into a room filled with people who would already be against this problem. And yet she is saying, we are also to blame. So she's got that word us in there, and that's going to be a theme that she pursues in subsequent paragraphs. So we get to paragraph 4, and here she does focus on the theme of the South. We've got Alabama mentioned, we've got North and South Carolina mentioned, and we've got Georgia mentioned. So there is a theme of the South. And she uses those states to compare and contrast just how bad it can be. Alabama is bad. And yet, as we move through this paragraph, we find states that are even worse than Alabama when it comes to child labor laws. I think that we are supposed to be shocked by that first sentence, and then the second sentence comes in, and it is far more horrible for children than the case in Alabama. I think that there's that while we sleep again, which was in the paragraph number 3. So we get the while we sleep again, and she's using us and we. She's bringing that issue into the room. The technical term for that is forced teaming, although the AP exam wouldn't care if you knew that or not. You could just say she's using us and we, and that would be more than enough. And then also, I think the 11 hours at night, I mean, that's just a crazy number. In 2024, we have to look at that number and think, we would not ask that of adults. I mean, they would get time and a half for those extra 3 hours. And yet we're asking this of children, little girls. Again, there's that phrase, little girls. We're asking that of them back in 1905. I am a little bit confused by white girls. I don't think the College Board would give us anything that was racist in the slightest. I don't know if just black girls were not allowed to work in industry, and so white girls are the only demographic that she's really speaking of. I'm not exactly sure why that word is used there. I think it's kind of strange, and personally, if I were writing this essay with my confusion over that word, I would completely ignore it. So we get to paragraph 5, and she starts with an exclamatory sentence. And I think that is, again, to point out the horrors that are going on in Georgia. There is no restriction whatever. We have the term girl again. This time the girl is 6 or 7 years old. I could see where most students would not understand the phrase just tall enough to reach the bobbins, but I think that they could figure out that that's something dangerous. It's something that they're sticking their hands into. It's a machine, even if they don't know exactly what bobbins are. And then we also have the repetition of 11 hours. And again, we have the repetition of while we sleep. So while the women in the room are busy sleeping, while the women in the room are busy relaxing, while the women in the room are rejuvenating, the children in Georgia are working 11 hours. We get to paragraph 6, and now she moves it away from the South and makes sure that we understand this is going on all over the country. She brings up New Jersey as a particularly poor example of child labor laws. They actually had a good law on the books that was repealed so that children could work from 6 in the evening and at noon on Friday. So in New Jersey, they've gone backwards. She's, I think, contrasting that, comparing that with Georgia, Alabama, North, and South Carolina, the states that she has already brought up. And again, she uses the terms boys and girls, infantilizing the children, making sure that we remember they are very young. And then finally, we get this sarcasm again at the end, just as we did in the end of the first paragraph. We get sarcasm at the end of the 6th paragraph. Enjoy the pitiful privilege of working all night long. And I do like that alliterative diction, pitiful privilege. She's going to bring that up later as well. So we go to paragraph 7, and this paragraph is just absolutely loaded. We're in Pennsylvania, so we're still in the North. She's continuing the theme that this is an issue that affects the entire country, not just an issue in the South, as I think a lot of people would assume. Children replacing slaves in the factories, cheap labor replacing free labor, right? But this is also an issue that affects the North as well. We get the repetition of little girl. We get this idea, I love the image of carrying her pail of midnight luncheon as happier people carry their midday luncheon. So, again, just this horrific image of a 13-year-old leaving her house, let's say at 11:30, with her lunch pail just like we would maybe think of a 30-year-old industrial steel worker in the 1970s working midnights with their lunch pail. So she's equating an adult in industry with a child in industry by using this image that links the two. And she's explicit in that comparison as she comes in with the happier people in the next phrase. I also really like that instead of calling Pennsylvania a state, she calls Pennsylvania a commonwealth at the end of this paragraph. I think she uses that word because Pennsylvania wants to call itself a commonwealth. Well, there's nothing commonly wealthy about sending 13-year-olds out to work. And also, the word commonwealth has a connotation to it of something statelier, something more royal, something better than just a state, right? And so by using the word commonwealth, I feel like she is contrasting that with the actual situation within that commonwealth. We go on to paragraph 8, which is just one sentence long. It is a rhetorical question. And here we get mothers and teachers. That would obviously be because most teachers at that time would have been women, at least at public schools. There would have been boarding schools across the country that were filled with male teachers. But most teachers would have been women at this time. And we get the first explicit connection between child labor and women's suffrage by bringing up mothers and teachers in Georgia who if they could vote, the situation wouldn't be the same. So Florence Kelly is not necessarily interested in women's suffrage, but she is speaking to a room of women suffragists. And so she is taking her issue and showing the women in the room how the two, their issue and her issue, are actually very connected. We get to paragraph 9, which is easily the longest paragraph in the speech. And she opens it with a rhetorical question. Now, paragraph 8 was a one-sentence rhetorical question, and then she opens paragraph 9 with another rhetorical question. At lines 62 and 63, she again links child labor to voting. And then at the end of paragraph 9, we've got that lack of conjunction again. They carry bundles of garments from the factories to the tenements, little beasts of burden, robbed of school life that they may work for us. So again, a lack of coordinate conjunction there. We also get that alliterative diction, beasts of burden. So now she is comparing children to animals, not from her perspective, not in a derogatory light, but she's saying that is how the children are being treated, right? They are being treated like animals, like beasts of burden. Then we get to paragraph 10. And these are just some horrific pictures that I've included. I've seen pictures like this before. I can't even imagine. My grandmother grew up in eastern Tennessee in the 1930s, and she worked at a very early age, although not in filth like this, and I'm at least thankful for that. She went to the first grade and then dropped out of school to help her father on their farm. So here we have the most explicit forced teaming that we've had thus far. We do not wish this. We prefer to have our work done by men and women, but we are almost powerless. So we've got that repetition of we and that forced teaming. She is making this an issue that is about not just the people who are against child labor, but also the people in this room who are the most obvious candidates to go out and fight for children and fight, obviously, for voting rights as well. So now we get to paragraph 11, and 12. And I included these together because they're both very short and we were coming to the end. But in paragraph 11, Kelly brings up a new idea. And that idea is that men need to be brought on board for the issues of this speech. That if women are going to get the right to vote, it is going to be men that ultimately give it to them. If we are going to have a change in child labor laws in 1905, it is going to be men that are going to make those changes. So she doesn't ignore that. She embraces it. And I think she wants to temper some of the language, some of the speech that was coming out of the suffragist movement and help them understand that only by joining forces with at least some men, even if it's a minority of men, will their ultimate goals be achieved. And then she makes a claim at the end of paragraph 11. No labor organization in this country ever fails to respond to an appeal for help in the freeing of the children. So it's a statement, but it's made with the intention, I think, of putting pressure on labor organizations to do exactly what she says they always do. And then finally, we get to the end, and I think the most important thing here is to point out that she again uses the word children. She ups the ante by, instead of using the word work, she uses the word toil, which I think has a connotation of even harder work. And then also she ends it with this exclamatory statement. So that is a breakdown of the 2011 Florence Kelly AP English Language and Composition prompt and passage. I hope that that helps you and gives you plenty of ideas to write about and analyze as you write this prompt, if you are assigned this prompt in class as a practice prompt. I'm going to link in the description a video where I go through how to write a body paragraph in a rhetorical analysis essay. It does not use the Florence Kelly passage. It uses the John F. Kennedy passage. I believe that's from 2012. But the idea is the same. Thank you.